Welcome folks, I am Jaby Koay, and this is a comparison between the Canon R5 and the Sony a7S III. Neither Canon nor Sony sponsored this video, though I'm open to that. I am totally a sellout. So I'm a filmmaker and a vlogger first and a photographer fourth. I specify that for a reason. That's how I'm coming at this. A lot of the videos you find on the Canon or the Sony stuff is for photographers, which really frustrates me because, like I said, I'm a filmmaker and vlogger first. I want to know information as a filmmaker or a vlogger. How do the lenses work? How does the camera work as far as that goes? Because I feel like you have a lot more people who are into the video aspect of these cameras than the photography aspect, and yet it seems like most of what you'll find on YouTube is for photographers, and that frustrates me. My approach is going to be very, very simple. I'm not going to hit you with a bunch of charts and whatnot and super weird technical stuff. There's a lot of channels that already do that very, very well. I'm coming at this very simply. Does it work? How well does it work? And which one should you get? Now, if you already have a DSLR that's working for you or a video camera of some kind, make that work as best as you can. Only upgrade when you really, really need to. If you're someone who doesn't have a lot of money and you've got an iPhone or a really, really capable smartphone, make that work for vlogging. You don't need to get either of these for vlogging. This is just if you're trying to expand your tools and take your game to the next level. If you don't want to watch this whole thing, the simple answer is this. If you're looking for a tool as a filmmaker, I would go with the Sony a7S III. If your interests are strictly filmmaking, Sony a7S III is the way to go. Now, if you're someone who really, really likes photography and filmmaking, then I would go with the Canon R5. I'll try to break down why in the next few moments here. Before I tell you exactly why I feel the way that I do, I want to let you know, for full disclosure, that I come from the Canon family. I've been buying Canon cameras and lenses for years now, and making the transition into Sony is a very, very difficult one, or has been. I've become more acclimated to it since buying the Sony stuff. Even having had the Sony camera for a while, I still find Canon's interface to be easier to use, easier to navigate. Sony's can be quite intimidating, especially coming from the Canon side, but I have found that it's kind of like comparing Windows and Apple, because Apple's like, does it work? Yes, okay, cool. And it's very, very simple, but when you really try to do something super, super specific, that's where Windows is usually better. And I feel like Sony is almost like the Windows to Canon's Apple, if that makes any sense. Hopefully that was not a stupid analogy. Even just like looking at the camera, just looking at the buttons and whatnot, there's a lot more going on here. At least it feels like it at a cursory glance than with the Canon. Also, as far as like usability, Canon's I feel is easier to use because of like the touch screen. It just, you can touch everything on the goddamn screen, whereas Sony, for whatever reason, still kind of limits you. That sort of red tape, I don't know why it's there, but it is frustrating when I'm trying to just like touch, it's just a little bit more cumbersome in that regard. Overall, I feel like the Sony excels as far as video goes. It also just feels easier to hold, especially when you're using something like the, as far as vlogging, when you're using a 20mm prime lens. This is a great, great vlogging lens. I love this lens so, so much, and you'll find a lot of videos touting this, especially over the 24mm equivalent from G Master. This is just a G. If you don't know what G Master is, it's Sony's highest end of lenses, and then there's like the G line, which is like not quite G Master, but it's still pretty good. Let's weigh these two cameras, shall we? I have a scale right here. Both of these are equipped with comparable lenses. So this has the 15-35, this has the 16-35. So let's weigh the Canon first. Canon weighs in at 3 pounds, 6 ounces and 3/4. We're gonna weigh the Sony now, 3 pounds and 1/4 ounce. So the Sony with an equivalent lens is lighter. Now, there was a lot of controversy around the Canon R5 because of overheating issues, and I bought into the system anyway. I'm like, well, maybe I can make it work. Those overheating issues do start to mess with you. Like, I was shooting a brand deal with Achara. If you don't know who Achara is, she's on my channel a lot. I was shooting a brand deal for Skillshare. I was shooting in one of Canon's highest quality modes. It's 4K HQ, where it downsamples from the entire 8K sensor. And it looks gorgeous. It looks beautiful. But when you see that clock ticking down, telling you how much less time you have, it really messes with your head and puts more undue stress and pressure on you to like move quicker, and then you're more temperamental with I only had me and Achara, and it was so stressful to shoot with this damn camera. It's like, it was really, really stressful. However, recently, Char and I went out to do some photography for her Instagram, and this is by far my favorite camera to shoot photography with, to shoot photos with. If I was to go on a trip to see family across country, like in Florida or New York, this is what I would bring. not the Sony a7S III. Why? Because I can get really nice quality video out of this thing and photos. I wouldn't use this for photography. It is capable of photography, but I personally wouldn't use it for photos because the quality of the photos is just not as nice as this one. Now that is purely ego, because the photos coming out of this are actually really nice. I did some tests last night and they actually look nice, but because of my ego as someone who likes to acquire gear and whatnot, as someone who likes the best quality possible, I'm taking this to go see family, even though it's a little bit more cumbersome. So one of the cool things about this camera as a filmmaker, let me see if I can show you. In the menu system here, there's something called marker display. And this right here gives you the option to have aspect markers for which mode you want to shoot in. I love this. I wish Canon had this. This to me is a dope feature. If you want to shoot in 235 mode, you get these white lines, so you have an indicator as to where the 235 aspect ratio is, and you can clearly see where the framing would be. I really appreciate that as a filmmaker because it makes it easier to frame my stuff. That being said, the Canon has more versatility as far as it goes for actual aspect ratios and options. Let me see if I can show you real quick. So if I go to the menu, you can see the quality right there. You can go to 4K HQ mode, which downsamples from 8K, like I said. Now let's disable that for the moment. You have so many options here. As you can see, you have HD, which is 1920 by 1080. You have regular 4K for 3840 by 2160, but then you have wider 4K, which is like, I guess it's a 2:1 aspect ratio, or at least close to it. Then you have regular 8K and then the wider 8K. Again, you can go back into HQ mode and you can get true 24p with the wider aspect ratio in 4K. And I love that. I love shooting in that mode. I think it just looks so beautiful. I just wish it didn't overheat. Canon has a regular 4K mode that has something called line skipping. Now, I can't like explain that to you that well. I conceptually get it. All I can tell you in a nutshell is line skipping doesn't look quite as crisp as downsampling from 8K. What I have found though is you probably won't see the difference. This is purely ego. This is purely tech ego. If you're shooting in the HQ mode, will it look better? Of course it'll look better. I mean, if you're looking at it side by side, the HQ mode will look beautiful. But most people aren't gonna be able to tell, oh, that wasn't HQ mode. They're not gonna look at it that way. One of the things I have discovered with Sony is they have a lot of lightweight options, and I love that about Sony. This is a lens I really wish Canon would make. Look how small it is. I get goosebumps just holding this. This is awesome. So I'm gonna weigh this for you. Less than 3 pounds. Less than 3 pounds. Now also bear in mind, you're gonna add on a little weight when you have a road mic if you're a vlogger. I'm purely speaking as a vlogger with this lens. This is easy to do. Oh my God, I love this. There's different stabilization modes you can do on both of these cameras. They're quite similar. On the Sony side, you can have stabilization off, or you can have it standard, or you can have it active. Now active is like buttery smooth. It almost looks like you're on a gimbal. It looks so smooth. Canon has something similar. You can have it off, you can have it on, or you can have it enhanced. And you can see right there like how much it's punching in. I have found that the active stabilization on Sony is fantastic. And I looked up information to try to find out what the crop factor is on the Sony side when you do that active stabilization. And apparently it's not losing any resolution whatsoever. A couple of things that Canon has that Sony doesn't have is options. So you have this ring here for your RF lenses, and I actually enjoy using this ring. There's a lot of people who don't give a shit about it. I like it. I use this for my ISO. One of the options you get with Canon are adapters to go from RF to EF. If you don't know what that is, I'm sure you do if you're watching this video, but if you don't know what EF and RF is, EF is Canon's older lens line, which is still very, very good, and RF is their new lens line, which is this new mount here. So in order to use the EF lenses on an RF mount, you've got adapters. Now there are 2 adapters here in my hand. One has that ring I was talking about, and the other has this drop-in ND filter. So you can, that's a filter right there. You just drop that in. And if you want to use a polarizing filter instead, you can use that. I had the polarizing filter and I didn't like it. I was not impressed with it, so I returned it because it's quite, this is a very expensive adapter. They are overcharging for this adapter, in my opinion. This, I don't know if you can see it, but there's a little dial here, and it slides way too easily. I was shooting photos of Achara, and I had it at the maximum ND filter setting, which means the darkest setting, and didn't even realize it because there's like no indication on screen that it's happening. You just have to look at the tiny print right here. Look at that tiny print, okay? Look how big my thumb is on top of it. You can't see that when you're shooting in the dark or when you're shooting in darker areas. There's no locking mechanism in place, which means that as you're moving around and you're shooting photos or whatever, it just slides around, and you might not know that you've gone to a darker setting on your ND filter, and you're like, what the hell, what's going on? Like, why is my image so dark? Why do I have to go all the way to 20,000 ISO? And then you find out you've been shooting, 1,000 photos wrong. It can be really, really frustrating. Keep that in mind if you decide to get this adapter. There is also Canon's EFS line, which is dedicated to their crop sensor line, like the Canon 7D, the 70D, the 80D, the 90D, and the Rebel series. Now let's weigh this one. This is a 10 to 18 vlogging lens. Look how much this weighs. 2 pounds, 7 ounces. That's pretty cool. What is the caveat with this? You are shooting in crop mode, which means you're getting less of the sensor. Most people aren't gonna notice that. Most people won't give a shit. It's just a cool option to have to be able to shoot this with the 10 to 18. What is the equivalent of that? 10 times 1.6? I don't know what that is. It's like 16 millimeters. Now, why would I do that when I've got this 15 to 35 right here? Because of the weight. This is so light. This is really, really light. This is lighter than this one. It feels super easy to hold. I can do this all day long. And you can go all the way into 18. I'm not even recording. I don't know why I'm looking at this damn thing. You can go all the way into 18, which I forget what the crop factor is, like 24 equivalent. This is actually a very, very viable vlogging lens. This is a cheap lens. You don't have to have this ring adapter. You can get the cheaper adapter for $100. This one's $200 because I wanted this option here. It's a great vlogging lens if you're willing to go into crop mode. Now, if you want to go into Super 35 mode or crop mode on this camera, that's where the Canon ends up excelling, because you can still get 4K out of your crop mode in this camera because it's got more megapixel count on its sensor. Whereas this is 12 megapixels, so when it goes into crop mode, it can't do 4K anymore. It's just not gonna look right. All right, I'm walking, holding the Canon R5 by the grip of the body. I have the 15 to 35 on here, all the way open at 15 to 2.8. I don't have any digital stabilization. It's only the lens and the IBIS that are active right now. So now I'm walking, holding the Canon R5 again from the grip of the body, not the lens. I'm about to hold it from the lens in a moment because my arm's getting tired. But this is all the way open at 15 on the 15 to 35 lens, and I have digital stabilization on top of the in-body and lens stabilization. So now we're working with enhanced stabilization. Again, holding the camera from the grip instead of the lens, and it's at 15 millimeters, 2.8, and this is what it looks like with the enhanced stabilization on top of it. Okay, I am shooting on the Canon R5 now with the 10 to 18, all the way open at 10. This is in crop mode, but the cool thing with the Canon R5 is, even though it's in crop mode, it still offers me the full 4K width, which is 4096 by 2160. Okay, now we've got digital stabilization on the Canon R5 with the 10 to 18 millimeter, again, all the way open at 10, which effectively becomes a 16 millimeter on a full frame body. And finally, we have the enhanced version of the digital stabilization. Again, Canon R5, 10 to 18, all the way open at 10 millimeter, which effectively becomes 16 millimeter on a full frame. And we have that cool widescreen going on with the 4096 by 2160. So now we are on the Sony a7S III. I'm holding the body by the grip. This is the 16 to 35, which does not have image stabilization on the lens, but the body has IBIS in it. I currently have stabilization turned off. Now I am on the Sony a7S III, 16 to 35 again, open at 16, f2.8. Standard stabilization is on. So this is what it looks like with standard stabilization walking around my apartment. And finally, we have the Sony a7S III with the 16 to 35 with active stabilization. So I'm walking around, it's shaking in my hand just like it's been doing the whole time. And admittedly, this is a lot easier to hold, even with the 16 to 35, than the Canon with the 15 to 35. It is lighter, not by much, but noticeable enough that my arm isn't getting tired as quickly as it did with the Canon R5. This is the last thing I wanted to show you. This is the Sony a7S III with the 20mm on it at f1.8. I don't know how the colors are looking. Canon colors for me tend to look better, and I have to sort of fight with the Sony a little bit to get the colors to look the way I want it to. But this is active stabilization with the Sony a7S III, 20mm, 1.8. And now, same thing, 20mm, 1.8. But this time standard stabilization. Walking around like I've been doing, this is the easiest thing to hold in terms of Sony a7S III because it's the 20mm, it's a very lightweight lens. Finally, we have the 20mm on the Sony a7S III without any stabilization turned on. Not standard, not active. This is just as regular as it gets. So what do you guys think? Right now we are looking at the back of the Sony a7S III, and there's something I wanted to show you guys before I forget. If I manipulate these dials right here, nothing, like, it's shifting my aperture. If I rotate this dial on the back, that's again shifting my aperture. I have custom dials that I've set up, so I have to hit this trash icon, and now these dials work, where I can hit this, I can use this dial here, and it'll shift my shutter speed, which is what I have it set to. And if I hit this dial right here on top, it'll change my ISO, because that's what I have it set to, and then this will change the aperture. But what I hate is that, and I don't know if anyone knows how to fix this, I would love to know. I always have to hit this trash icon in order to turn it on every time I turn on the camera. Because if I shut the camera off and turn it back on, I'm in that same situation again, where rotating this dial doesn't give me my shutter, it just gives me aperture again. I have to hit that trash icon in order to activate this dial over here for my shutter, and this for my ISO, and this for my aperture. It's really annoying. If anyone knows how to fix that, I would love to know. This is not something I have to deal with on the Canon side. The other thing to consider is record times. With the Sony, there are no limits as far as recording goes. You can record forever and ever. Lately, I have been using this camera for live streaming. I can get really, really high quality live streaming out of this camera. I love it. You can do 60 frames a second. You can do it in 4K or 1080. I can do it in 4K HQ for hours on end. As long as I'm not using a card, as long as I'm not recording to a card, this camera can record for a very, very long time in HQ mode, 4K HQ mode. A lot of people don't realize that. If you're recording to a Ninja Atomos, you could probably get longer record times out of it. I don't know how well that works because I don't own a Ninja Atomos. I haven't done any tests with it. All I know is you can get a lot of time out of this if you're, streaming, if you're going out of the HDMI port. I mentioned how Sony has a lot of lightweight options for their lenses. Also, in addition to that, their lenses are very, very quiet. I don't hear any motors going on any of my Sony lenses, at least as far as I have tested so far. Now with Canon, that's mostly true, but if you're getting one of their EF lenses, which I have, but I don't have them on the table right now. If you're getting one of their EF lenses, you will more likely hear it than you will with the Sony lens. How loud? It depends on which lens. I recently acquired the EF 135. Again, I don't have it in front of me, but that lens is super, super quiet, and it's a beautiful lens. I recommend it for those of you who are getting into collecting primes and want that long range wide aperture prime. And there you go. I think I've covered everything. If you guys have any questions, I'm happy to answer them to the best of my abilities. Again, I'm coming at this with a very, very simple approach. I love this stuff, but I'm not Gerald Undone. I'm not Jared Poland's, Phonos, Frodos. I'm not any of those guys. I don't break it down the way they do because I'm just asking the question, does it work? How well does it work? Which one should I use? Now, again, if you're a filmmaker, go with the Sony a7S III. This is the best you can ask for. If you are all about the best photography and you're occasionally shooting videos or you don't mind shooting in less than the HQ mode, less than the 8K mode, then this is a great camera actually. This will serve you very, very, very well. And there are ways to shoot with this where it won't overheat on you. It's more expensive, but you're also getting higher quality video out of it, higher quality photos out of it. This video came out to be a lot longer than I was expecting, but I wanted to make sure I covered all my areas. Let me know if you have any questions in the comments below. I'll be happy to answer them, and maybe I'll do a follow-up video at some point. I'm Jaby Koay. Thanks for hanging out. Peace out.